What would you do if someone mistook you for a thief, just because of how you look? One quiet afternoon at a supermarket in Atlanta, a woman in a hoodie was handcuffed without a word. But what no one knew was who she really was. A moment of injustice became the start of something bigger. Before we dive in, let us know. What time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. The afternoon light settled soft and gold over East Point, Georgia. It was the kind of spring day that made sidewalks feel wider, birds sound closer, and for just a moment, even the air seemed to slow down. At the edge of Granner's Market parking lot, Zelma Ridge stepped out of her old sedan. Inside the store, fluorescent lights hummed above her head as she made her way past displays of strawberries and cucumbers. Her cart squeaked slightly with every few feet, but no one looked her way. That was how she liked it. She wasn't shopping for herself. The items on her list, diapers, peanut butter, oatmeal, cleaning supplies, were all for the Briar Hope Center, a small outreach shelter nestled behind a church just a few blocks from the railroad tracks. Zelma had helped fund it anonymously for 6 years. No one there knew she was the reason their bills got paid or why they never ran out of notebooks for the after-school kids program. Zelma had once been the name tech blogs couldn't stop writing about. Terra Light Systems, her company, her design, her obsession, had been called the quiet revolution in secure data management. When she sold it, the buyout made headlines. But she vanished just as fast. No interviews, no TED Talks, no red carpets. What the world didn't know was that 6 months before that sale, her mother had died in a hospital hallway. They didn't take her back for treatment. She'd waited on a gurney in pain while staff made assumptions based on her clothes, her insurance status, and the color of her skin. Zelma had arrived too late. That day rewrote everything for her. After that, it wasn't about what she could build. It was about who she could help without ever being seen. She lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. No personal assistant, no driver, no foundation gala dinners. Her donations came through a maze of small LLCs and third-party fronts. It gave her peace, and it gave her freedom. But today, something felt different. A man behind the customer service counter noticed her as she passed. Travis Moen, mid-40s, pressed shirt, haircut too short, voice always an octave too loud. He'd been managing Granner's Market for 7 years and prided himself on keeping things tight. What that meant in practice was a lot of watching, mostly certain people, the ones he thought didn't fit the place. Travis watched Zelma through the overhead camera feeds, one eye on the monitors, one hand tapping the desk. "She's been in here too long," he muttered. One of the younger employees raised an eyebrow. "She's got a full cart, man." Travis didn't answer. His jaw shifted slightly and he leaned closer to the screen. "No purse. Look how she keeps looking around," he said. "People don't need 10 minutes in the same aisle to buy peanut butter." He reached for his phone and sent a quick text to the in-store security officer. The message was short. "Possible theft. Row 4. Dark hoodie jeans. Watch close." Zelma, unaware, continued moving quietly through the store. She picked items with care, pausing to read labels, comparing sizes and prices. She wasn't in a rush. These shopping trips were one of the few things that made her feel grounded. Normal. She paused at the cereal section, selecting a few boxes of bran flakes and granola bars. As she turned into the next aisle, she noticed a man in uniform, plain clothes, stocky build, pretending to scan labels 2 feet from her. His eyes didn't leave her cart. Zelma blinked, let out a slow breath, and moved on. At the checkout, she began placing her items on the belt, lined up by type. Canned goods first, then boxed foods, then baby supplies. Her hand reached into her hoodie pocket for her wallet. Behind her, the bell at the front door dinged twice. The air changed. 2 police officers stepped in, one older, one younger. They didn't walk fast. They didn't need to. Their presence was heavy enough. Travis appeared from a side aisle, gesturing toward the checkout. Zelma turned her head slightly, enough to catch the approach. She felt it before she saw it. The stiffness in the shoulders, the way people nearby stepped aside but stayed close enough to watch. The older officer stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, "we've had a report of suspicious activity. We need to speak with you outside." Zelma looked at him. Her eyes were calm, steady. "I haven't left the register," she said softly. "Everything's right there. I'm paying now." "We still need to talk to you," the officer replied, not unkindly but without flexibility. Travis was now standing a few feet behind them, arms crossed, his mouth tight. Zelma's gaze moved to the register screen. The total had already rung up, $112.87. Tax included. She had exact change in her pocket. But she knew what was about to happen had nothing to do with the groceries. Her fingers brushed the worn edge of her wallet, and then she wondered, just briefly like the tick of a second hand, what might be different if her skin were lighter, or her hoodie didn't hang so loose. The officer took a step closer. "Ma'am, I need you to come with us." She didn't flinch. She only looked at him and asked quietly, "If I looked a little different, would we still be doing this?" The air inside Granner's Market seemed to still the moment the officers asked Zelma to come with them. She stood quietly for half a second, maybe less. But in that half second, the world seemed to tilt. Before she could reach for her wallet again, one of the officers stepped forward and gently but firmly took hold of her wrist. The other moved behind her. Words weren't necessary, not to them, not in that moment. They'd made up their minds before she said a single word. She didn't struggle, didn't raise her voice. Her eyes just flicked once toward the register screen, still displaying her total. Then she lowered them to the floor. Her hands went behind her back slowly, deliberately, as if she was controlling each muscle to stop her body from trembling. The cold click of the cuffs sounded louder than it should have. Whispers rippled through the checkout lanes. One woman clutched her handbag closer. A teenage boy smirked and nudged his friend. An older man shook his head and turned his cart around to leave. No one spoke to her. No one asked if she was okay. They walked her toward the front entrance, each officer holding one arm, as if she might run or lash out. Her feet moved steadily, each step as heavy as the one before. Zelma's face showed nothing, but something deep inside her began to coil. It wasn't fear. It was something older than that. Familiar. Bitter. It took her back to that hospital hallway. She had run through that ER door 6 years ago, calling for help. Her mother was struggling to breathe, eyes fluttering, clutching her chest. But the nurse barely glanced up, asked about insurance, then waited. No rush, no urgency. Her mother had died in the waiting room, a black woman in a worn coat, mistaken for a problem before being seen as a person. Now, standing in a supermarket under buzzing lights, Zelma felt the same weight pressing down on her chest. Different uniforms, same eyes. They sat her on a hard bench just outside the sliding doors. Shoppers came and went, glancing at her like a display nobody wanted to buy. The officers spoke in low tones nearby. Her cart was left abandoned at the register, her groceries still neatly sorted. A few feet away, Marley Chen stood frozen near the bakery section. She'd watched the whole thing. 23 years old, journalism student, camera always in her bag, eyes trained by habit to spot what didn't look right. And this didn't look right. She pulled out her phone and started recording. Quiet, steady hands. No commentary, just the scene. A woman in cuffs, no raised voices, no alarm, just assumption and silence. When the officers led Zelma toward the exit, Marley followed at a distance, careful to stay out of their way. She kept filming even after the automatic doors whooshed shut behind them. Then she turned off the camera and stood there, trying to make sense of what she'd just seen. Something gnawed at her. It wasn't just the unfairness, it was the woman herself, the way she stood, the calm, the eyes. Marley made her way to the front register, where a young cashier was restocking bags. "Excuse me," Marley said softly. "Was that woman trying to steal something?" The cashier blinked. "No," he said, glancing toward the doors. She hadn't even paid yet, but her stuff was rung up. She had her wallet out. "Did she say anything?" She asked if they'd still be doing this if she looked different. That hit Marley in the stomach. She gave a small nod, thanked him, and walked out into the late afternoon sun. Back in her tiny apartment, Marley sat on the edge of her bed. Laptop open, video loaded. She played it twice, then a third time. Each time she paused on Zelma's face. The moment the cuffs clicked, the moment she looked at the officer, the moment she dropped her gaze. There was no panic, no begging, no flinching, just this quiet, controlled sadness. And something else. Resolve. She zoomed in, frame by frame, until Zelma's eyes filled the screen. Marley had interviewed city council members, activists, small business owners. She knew the difference between scared and strong. This woman wasn't confused. She wasn't defeated. She'd been here before. Marley clicked pause, then opened a new tab. She didn't know Zelma's name, but maybe someone would recognize her. Or maybe she'd find out herself. Because that woman didn't belong in cuffs. She belonged behind a microphone, or a podium, or something else entirely. And Marley couldn't let this become just another clip in a sea of forgotten injustice. There was something more here. She could feel it, like the way the wind shifts just before a storm. Only this time the storm might speak. The walls inside Broward County Police Department were painted an off-white that seemed more gray under the buzzing lights. Zelma sat on a metal bench in a holding room with no clock, no window, and no sense of time. Her wrists had been freed, but the marks from the cuffs were still faintly visible. Red lines pressed into her skin like the echo of something that wasn't quite pain, but wasn't far from it either. She hadn't been charged. No Miranda rights, no formal accusations. Just a vague explanation from the officer at the desk. "We're reviewing store footage." Standard protocol. Zelma didn't answer. She simply nodded once and leaned back against the wall, arms folded loosely across her lap. A paper cup of water sat untouched beside her. She didn't need it. What she needed was time to think. They hadn't asked for her ID yet, and she wasn't about to offer it, not because she had anything to hide, but because revealing her name would pull a thread she wasn't ready to unravel. Zelma Ridge was more than a name. It was a signal. One search, one whisper to the right person, and the headlines would light up like wildfire. Woman behind Terrorlight scandalized at supermarket. Tech mogul in cuffs after grocery misunderstanding. She could already picture the way the media would twist it. Not about race, not about injustice, just curiosity, speculation, noise. She closed her eyes. Years ago, her father had sat her down after she lost a scholarship because she'd been labeled difficult in a class discussion. He had looked at her with both pride and quiet sorrow and said, "Power means nothing if you can't stay calm when they try to take it from you." It had taken her years to understand what he meant. This was one of those moments. The sound of hard-soled shoes echoed down the hallway. She looked up just as Travis Moen stepped into view, arms swinging stiffly at his sides like a man who wasn't sure whether he was here to complain or to gloat. He didn't ask if he could come in. He just stood near the open doorway, voice sharp and loud enough for anyone passing by to hear. "I want to be sure my store's property is protected," he said, facing the officer behind the desk. "We're cooperating, but I don't think we're done here." Then he turned toward her, lips drawn tight. "You people think you can get away with anything these days," he said flatly. "Put on a hoodie, walk slow, act quiet, like that makes you invisible." Zelma didn't move. She met his stare with something steadier than anger. Her silence, again, was a kind of mirror. Travis shifted, just a little. A flicker of something passed across his face. Maybe confusion, maybe discomfort, but he masked it with another glance toward the officer. "Just doing my job," he said, more to the room than to her. When he finally left, the air seemed to release. Zelma leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, her hands clasped. Her fingers twitched, wanting to reach for the phone still locked in the plastic evidence bin behind the desk. One call, one lawyer, one signature, and the situation would flip. But that wasn't what she came here to do. Out in the world, something else was starting. Marley Chen had spent the better part of her evening editing a short video. It wasn't fancy. No filters, no music. Just truth. She included the full clip of Zelma being handcuffed, layered with a still image of the grocery receipt that showed the items had already been scanned and totaled. She stared at the screen for a long time before typing the caption. This woman wasn't stealing. She was stopped for existing. Then she hit publish. At first, nothing happened. A few views, a couple of comments. But within an hour, her phone began to buzz. Retweets, messages, people asking for more context, some angry, some grateful. By midnight, the video had been shared by 3 local journalists and picked up by a civil rights organization's social media team. In the quiet of her apartment, Marley sat cross-legged on the floor, refreshing the page. Part of her felt proud. Another part felt uneasy. She didn't know who the woman in the video really was, but something about her eyes. It was still with her. She replayed the footage once more, pausing at the moment right before the cuffs. Zelma had looked down, not from fear but from calculation, like someone who knew this scene too well, like someone who had learned that speaking too soon could cost more than staying quiet. Marley opened a notebook and scribbled down a question at the top of the page. Who is she really? She didn't know yet, but the world was starting to ask. And once a question like that gets loose, it doesn't go back in the box. By noon the next day, Marley Chen's video had crossed the 1 million view mark. It had taken less than 24 hours. She watched the number climb with a mixture of disbelief and unease. This wasn't just a viral clip. It had started a storm. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Journalists, advocacy groups, influencers, and complete strangers flooded her inbox. The comments on the video split into 2 worlds. Some were outraged, calling it exactly what it was: racial profiling. Others clung to suspicion, questioning the woman's silence, her hoodie, her refusal to give a name. If she wasn't hiding something, she'd have spoken up. People love playing victim these days. She looked too calm. Something's off. Marley read each one carefully, trying not to take it personally. But some of them dug under her skin anyway, because she had seen Zelma's face, felt the gravity in her silence. That wasn't guilt. That was someone who had carried this weight before and had learned to wear it like armor. Across town, in a holding room that still smelled like coffee and old paper, Zelma Ridge sat with her back straight, waiting. They hadn't charged her. They hadn't even processed her, just stalled. Waiting on footage, they said again, as if video could tell them more than her receipt or the fact that she never walked past the register. Finally, a young officer walked in with a clipboard and a cautious expression. "You're free to go," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. Zelma didn't ask why. She didn't nod or thank him. She stood slowly, picked up her hoodie from the back of the chair, and walked through the building like she hadn't spent the last 12 hours being watched. The moment she stepped outside, a wall of sound met her. Cameras clicked, voices overlapped, reporters shoved microphones toward her face. The sidewalk pulsed with questions. "Ma'am, what's your name? Were you arrested? Do you plan to sue?" Zelma paused for only a moment. Then she turned, not to face the crowd, but away from it. She walked toward the parking lot without a word, her footsteps steady on the concrete. She didn't notice the young woman leaning against the side of a rusted sedan until she passed her. "I saw what happened," Marley said, softly but clear enough to be heard over the chaos. Zelma stopped. Marley stepped forward, pulling a small card from her jacket. "I'm Marley Chen. I'm not with a news station, just trying to tell the truth." Zelma looked at her, not suspicious, not curious, just present. "I know you're not who you say you are," Marley continued, offering the card. "Or maybe you didn't say anything at all, but I think people need to hear from you, whoever you are." Zelma took the card. No expression on her face, just a slow blink. She held it for a second longer than necessary. Then she nodded once, pocketed the card, and kept walking. Marley didn't call after her. She didn't take out her phone or try to record. She just stood there, heart racing, watching the back of a woman who carried more mystery than most people did in a lifetime. Later that evening, Marley sat at her small desk, trying to finish an article draft but unable to focus. She kept glancing at her inbox, refreshing it like something might appear by force of will. She hadn't expected a reply. Not really, but something about Zelma's nod had lingered. It wasn't dismissive. It wasn't even guarded. It was deliberate. Around 10:30, just as she was about to shut down for the night, a new email came in from an address that looked like it had been created 5 minutes ago. No subject line, no greeting, just one sentence. "You're right. Let's talk. Zid." Marley stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She didn't reply right away. She just sat back in her chair, the soft hum of her old fridge in the background, and let the weight of that message settle in. The knock on her door came at 7:30 in the morning. Zelma didn't answer. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a windbreaker holding a notepad, a lanyard flapping in the breeze. His eyes flicked toward the hallway camera above her door, and then back to the knob. He knocked once more, then left a card wedged into the frame. The name on it belonged to a reporter from the Atlanta Herald. She closed the door again, locked it, and sat back down at her kitchen table. The blinds were drawn, the lights still off. A cup of tea had gone cold beside her. Her laptop glowed quietly, tabs open to headlines she hadn't meant to read. Her name wasn't on any of them, not yet, but her face was. The still shot from Marley's video, her eyes calm and defiant, her hands in cuffs, had gone everywhere. Some had called it haunting, others labeled it uncooperative. One news blog ran a piece comparing her to a long-rumored tech founder who had disappeared after a company buyout. They pulled up old grainy photos from Terralite's early years. She'd been younger then, in suits that didn't quite fit her, and press photos that never felt like home. Now those same images were stitched into side-by-side frames with the woman from Granner's Market. By morning, they were trending across multiple platforms. Activists picked it up. So did a handful of celebrities. Commentators on both sides weighed in. Some praised her quiet strength. Others criticized her for not giving her name, for being unhelpful. She leaned back, hands folded across her stomach. The air in the apartment felt thicker than usual. The world was starting to lean in close, and she'd spent years doing everything in her power to stay out of its reach. She turned toward the small wooden table near the window. A photo sat in a cracked silver frame, her mother standing in front of a church potluck, holding a dish with foil still on top. She had the kind of smile that could anchor a room. Zelma stared at it for a long moment. "I just wanted to help without being a face," she said aloud. "But now, maybe it's time." Across town, Marley Chen was still in her hoodie and pajama bottoms, crouched over her laptop, chewing a pencil. The email thread with Z had turned into something strange and careful. They hadn't met again. No phone calls. But last night, Zelma had sent a file. No subject line, no explanation, just a document titled O-Line Draft Version 2. Marley had opened it thinking it was a press statement. What she found instead was a full-fledged proposal, a national initiative, training programs, outreach models, grants. It was built like a campaign, but read like a roadmap. At the top of the document, one sentence was bolded. "What they see is not who we are. Let's teach them to see again." Marley scrolled down and read the list of organizations mentioned in the footnotes. A few names rang bells. Community shelters, food programs, scholarship funds. She started cross-checking with tax records, donation trails, anonymous sponsors. 12 different nonprofits. All in Georgia, all linked quietly to one source, all carrying out work in areas with histories of underfunding and racial neglect. Her hand hovered above the trackpad. "She's not just innocent," Marley whispered. "She's a quiet giant." She leaned back and rubbed her eyes. This wasn't just a story anymore. This was a woman who had reshaped parts of the state without ever stepping in front of a camera. And now the world was trying to frame her like she was just another viral video. Marley opened a clean document and started writing. Not an article, not yet, but a timeline of who Zelma had been, of who she might become if the story was told right. Back in her apartment, Zelma stood at the window, watching the street below. A few kids played with chalk on the sidewalk. A man walked his dog with one hand in his coat pocket. Life hadn't changed, not out there, not yet, but something had shifted inside her. She walked to her desk, pulled open the bottom drawer, and took out a worn leather folder. It had her initials on the corner, gold embossed. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside was the original blueprint for O-Line. One look is not enough. It had started as an idea scribbled on a plain napkin, a way to address the reflexes people had before they even knew they had them. She flipped to the last page and signed her name at the bottom. Not the legal signature, just a name. Clean and simple, Zelma Ridge. Then she clicked forward on the email thread with Marley and added 2 words before hitting send. It's time. The email was short, just 3 lines, but the weight behind it made reporters sit up straighter in their chairs. To members of the press, I'll be sharing a statement this Friday at 4 p.m. at the Greenleaf City Park Hall. This is not a press conference. This is a turning point. Zelma had sent it to only 4 outlets, ones she respected for their integrity, not their reach. There was no RSVP link, no request for exclusive access. She made it clear that the story wasn't hers alone to control, but one name stood apart from the rest. She had written directly to Marley, too. Marley, you were the first to see it for what it was. You'll be the only one allowed to film it in full. No cuts, no edits, just truth. Z. Marley didn't respond for nearly 24 hours. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because no words felt big enough to answer that kind of trust. When she finally wrote back, it was just, I'll be there. The day of the event, the community center hall was already full by 3:15. Folding chairs filled every row. Along the walls stood neighbors, store clerks, pastors, teachers, students with backpacks slung over one shoulder. A few wore shirts with #OneLook printed across the front. Someone handed out small fans with the phrase, "Change starts with how we see," printed on one side. Travis Moen stood at the back, arms crossed. He hadn't spoken publicly since the incident. The store hadn't fired him, but he had been placed on administrative review, and the tension around him was so thick you could smell it. He showed up that day not to listen, but to stand his ground. He told himself it was about fairness, about defending a system he believed he understood. But something about the energy in the room made his jaw tighten. At 4:01, the room fell into a hush. Zelma stepped up to the podium with no introduction, no music, no lights. She wore a plain navy blue blouse, black pants, and a silver necklace that caught the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Her hair was pulled back, no notes in her hand. She looked around the room slowly, as if letting each face land before she spoke. "My name is Zelma Ridge," she began, her voice steady but unhurried. "I built something big once, a tech company. Some of you may have heard of it. Most of you probably haven't, and that's just fine with me." She paused, allowing a few soft chuckles to ripple through the room. "I sold it years ago, then walked away, not because I lost interest, but because I realized that building something isn't enough if the people it's meant to help are still being torn down." She looked directly into the camera Marley was holding, then back at the audience. "Last week I was handcuffed in a grocery store. Not because I broke the law, not because I posed a threat, but because someone decided what kind of person I was before I ever opened my mouth." A murmur moved through the room. "I didn't come here today to point fingers. I didn't come to shame a store or a police department. I came to talk about vision, how broken it is, and how we begin to fix it." She reached down and picked up a single sheet of paper. "This is the outline for a new initiative. One look is not enough. It's not a campaign. It's not a fundraiser. It's a framework. It focuses on implicit bias training, community accountability, and policy change that starts with the people who see us first. Clerks, cashiers, security guards, officers. Not just teaching what not to do, but how to see beyond instinct." Applause rose around the room, hesitant at first, then stronger. "I'm not here to lead it alone," she said. "This belongs to everyone who's ever been looked at the wrong way and still chose to walk with dignity." As the crowd stood to clap, Travis shifted in his spot. His face held something between disbelief and annoyance. When the noise settled, he stepped forward a few feet and raised his voice just enough to be heard. "So what now?" he called out. "You'll make us all take classes on being nice?" Laughter scattered through the room, but it didn't reach Zelma. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "No," she said calmly. "I'll make sure you never forget what you failed to see." The silence that followed was louder than any applause. She didn't say another word after that, just stepped back from the podium and sat down in the front row. No handlers, no press badge, just a woman who decided the time for quiet had passed. And across the room, a dozen cameras kept rolling, but Marley's lens didn't flinch. She knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the moment the world started paying attention. Within days of the public event at Greenleaf Hall, the air around Zelma Ridge had changed, not just in her neighborhood or among those who already followed social issues closely, but across the state and slowly beyond it. Her speech, calm but direct, had circulated online in clips and quotes. Some called it brilliant, others called it performative. The backlash came quick and loud in some corners. Conservative pundits called her a drama queen in billionaire's clothing, mocking her as someone playing the oppressed while living in comfort. A few claimed her story was exaggerated. One local radio host said, "She's trying to rebrand herself as Rosa Parks with a 401k." Zelma didn't respond to any of it. Instead, she met with lawyers, not to sue, but to outline what legal cooperation would look like if police departments wanted to participate in the One Look is Not Enough initiative. She met with educators, small business owners, and faith leaders, not in press rooms, in coffee shops and back halls of churches, quietly, thoroughly. What surprised many was her decision not to pursue legal action against Granter's Market or the Broward County Police Department. When asked directly by a reporter why she wasn't suing, she answered plainly, "I'm not here to punish people. I'm here to change them." Her proposals weren't vague. She issued a public letter outlining two expectations. First, that the Broward County Police Department require all officers to complete a 3-month program on unconscious bias and decision-making under stress. Not optional, certified and reviewed. Second, that Granter's Market install an anonymous internal reporting system for racial profiling available to both staff and customers, and tie bonuses for management to improvements in bias-related complaints. Some said it was too idealistic. Others said it was too much. But a growing number said, finally, churches held forums. Colleges discussed it in lectures. Employees at other grocery chains began quietly submitting petitions for similar training programs. In this storm of attention, Travis Moen's name surfaced again. Not as a defendant, not as a villain, but as a symbol. His face, captured in one viral clip from the event, arms crossed at the back of the room, eyes narrowed, became a meme. One comment read, "This is what I don't see color looks like when it's being challenged." Internally, Granter's Market had called for a staff review. The regional manager held meetings, collected feedback, and suspended Travis pending that process. Weeks later, a mandatory staff-wide meeting was scheduled in the break room, where folding chairs were arranged in uneven rows between stacks of paper towel pallets and holiday candy. Travis stood near the front, not in uniform, but in jeans and a polo shirt. His expression was tired, defensive, but no longer angry. The store director introduced the session and then nodded toward him. Travis cleared his throat. His voice was lower than usual, more careful. "I'm not going to give a speech," when he started. "I made a call that day, one I thought was right at the time. I watched a woman shopping and decided she was a threat. She wasn't. I didn't see her clearly." He paused. "Maybe I didn't see things clearly for a long time." A few employees looked down. A few nodded. No one applauded, but no one walked out either. That was enough. Meanwhile, Marley had been quietly finishing her documentary. The footage she'd taken of Zelma, from the moment in handcuffs to the moment she stepped up to the podium, formed the spine of the story. But Marley hadn't stopped there. She interviewed volunteers from the shelters Zelma had funded, recorded conversations with workers at small libraries and food banks who only recently learned the name behind their biggest donor. One of them had said, "She gave us what we needed and didn't ask for a plaque or a photo op. That's the kind of power I believe in." In the final scene of the film, Marley let Zelma's words carry the last frame. No music, no fading logo, just a still shot of Zelma walking through a city street in the early evening. Her voice, quiet and certain, played over it. Power, when rooted in kindness, never fades. It was the kind of sentence that didn't need to be explained. It just stayed with you, long after the screen went dark. The conference room smelled faintly of dry erase markers and old carpet. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Travis Moen sat in the second row of folding chairs, arms crossed, though his posture had softened since he walked in. A projector flickered against a whiteboard, displaying a freeze frame of a black woman in a hoodie reaching for her wallet. No audio, just the image. The facilitator stood beside the screen, Her voice was calm but unwavering. Take a minute. Just look. Don't analyze. Don't assume. Just see. Travis kept his eyes on the photo. He shifted slightly in his chair. He wasn't sure what he felt. Embarrassed, maybe. Defensive, definitely. But under it all was something else. A sort of slow, tightening discomfort he couldn't explain away. The facilitator clicked to the next slide. A grocery store aisle. A kid leaning against a freezer case. Then another image. A woman standing by a car. Arms folded, eyes closed. What's the first thought that crosses your mind? She asked the room. No one answered right away. Travis looked down at the paper handout in his lap. The words blurred. Bias is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, dressed in policy and habit. He swallowed hard. Maybe I didn't see things clearly. Meanwhile, across town, Zelma stood in front of a whiteboard of her own, but hers was covered in sticky notes and colored paper. The Briar Hope Center's community room had been rearranged for an afternoon youth session. A dozen kids, mostly teenagers, sat in a semicircle around her. Some leaned back in their chairs, others took notes. One boy chewed the cap of his pen while staring at her like he didn't quite believe this was the same woman from the video. Zelma wasn't here to perform. She wasn't dressed for cameras. No podium, no staff. Just her and a circle of kids she might have once been. She told them pieces of her story, how she built something big, how she walked away, and how sometimes silence is a form of strength, but other times, it's a missed opportunity. A boy in the back raised his hand, hesitation flickering in his expression. Why didn't you fight back? He asked. When they stopped you, why didn't you say something? Zelma looked at him, nodding slowly. She let the silence sit for a beat. Because sometimes, she said, the most powerful fight is making them see what they tried to ignore. The room was still. No one took notes after that. That evening, Marley uploaded the final version of her documentary, One Look Is Not Enough, to a public platform. She didn't monetize it, no ads, no sponsors, just a link, a caption, and a quiet prayer that people would really listen. The film didn't open with sirens or dramatic music. It opened with the sound of a grocery store, beeps at the register, carts rattling, soft murmurs in the background. Then Zelma's face filled the screen, not from the day she was arrested, but from the day she stood at the podium and told the world who she really was. In less than 48 hours, the video had been viewed over 3 million times. It wasn't just a trend, it became a resource. Schools added it to discussion guides. Community groups requested permission to screen it at local libraries. Marley received messages from people in other states, store managers, teachers, church leaders, asking how to join the initiative. There was no soundtrack, no fast cuts, just voices, eyes, pauses. People saw themselves in the silence. And Zelma, she didn't give interviews. She didn't go on talk shows. She returned to the rhythms that had always grounded her. Early morning walks, grocery runs, with lists scribbled on old receipts. Handwritten notes slipped under doors of community centers she supported without ever signing her name. One afternoon, after finishing a class at Briar Hope, she stopped by the corner market to pick up fresh bread and apples. The air was crisp, sun catching the tops of passing cars. As she walked through the market's small parking lot, a woman in a denim jacket passed by and whispered, "Thank you." Just that. Nothing more. Zelma nodded gently, smiled, and kept walking. Near the entrance, a teenage employee hurried up beside her, slightly out of breath. "Miss Ridge," he said, "I just wanted to say, I applied for that training thing you created, the One Look thing. I'm starting next month." She stopped, looked at him kindly. "That's good," she said. "Not for me, for you." He beamed. She moved on. No cameras, no reporters. Just a nod and a quiet shift in the way the world worked, one small act at a time. Behind her, the automatic doors opened and closed again, with their familiar, soft whoosh. Ahead of her, the sun settled gently over East Point, like it had every other day. But somehow it all felt a little different now. Sometimes the most powerful change doesn't come from shouting. It comes from being seen, truly seen, for who we are. Zelma didn't fight back with noise or revenge. She fought by holding up a mirror and asking the world to look again. So what do we miss when we judge at first glance? And more importantly, what might change if we choose to see differently? If this story moved you, don't forget to follow the channel. There's more to come.